Good evening, Montreal. Welcome to another edition of the Suburban Radio Hour. I'm Beryl Wiseman, editor of Suburban, here with my colleagues and friends, Anthony Bonaparte, features editor, Mark Littman, our sports editor, and Mike Cohen with all the entertainment and society news. We're never at a loss for news, particularly this season. It seems to be every year things are happening, and Montreal is not exactly passive. Pick up the paper and you'll see full coverage, including a two-page photo spread of the huge Israel rally that took place last week. Get some more material on the McGill injunction, the encampments everywhere. UQAM has now joined the picture. West Island mayors celebrated the PME Montreal's 25th, biggest get-together of West Island mayors in a long time. The Terrebonne bike path is raising problems again. We'll be talking with Joel Chashu on that. 10th annual Darcy McGee medals were awarded. Movement for Ile Perrot to become one island, one city, and lots more. But first off, one of our front page stories, our good friend Joe Ortonio is chairman of the English Montreal School Board. He's announced he's running for re-election, and it's our great pleasure to welcome him back to the show. Joe, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. Now, Joe, we'll get to your announcement that you're running for chair again, but before you announced that, a couple of days earlier, you evidenced your displeasure with French language minister Jean-François Roberge taking some aim at English schools. What was in Roberge's mind? What was all that about?
Well, I can't be in his mind, but I think
good answer.
This is just another time where he took a cheap shot at the English-speaking community, at our expense, because he doesn't have any answers. And when he was Minister of Education, he clearly didn't know his own statistics, because he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. 4 years ago, he told us that we were teaching too much French. We had to cut on the amount of French that we were teaching in the English schools. And now, he's blaming the English schools because there's not enough French content. So, enough with the silly games. Let's talk facts. Let's actually resolve issues. Let's try to work together instead of taking these cheap shots. They're not appreciated. And at some point, we've got to push back.
And you've been a leader in that. And it's astounding often when one hears the politicians who resort to language division again. Didn't he get the memo that the OQLF itself has praised the English community for its bilingualism and even the use of French in business on Montreal Island? I believe the OQLF said there really isn't a problem. There's no decrease in the use of French. In fact, there's an increase. So aren't we reading all the same things, or he's got a different version, a censored version, a tailored version?
Yeah, I think we're all reading the same things, but there's a lot of stats out there. And I think that this government in particular, and Mr. Roberge as well, are cherry-picking the stats that they want to use. So when the stats show that French is healthy, French is growing, they seem to want to ignore those stats. And whenever they go down in the polls, they come up with some random stat that, there's a drop in like 0.3% in the amount of people who are speaking French at home. And all of a sudden, the apocalypse is coming. We're going to become Louisiana. We have to do something drastic. It's the same game. They've been doing this for like 6 years already. It's getting old.
It's getting old, and what's particularly amusing, just to remind our listeners, that this latest round in the language wars and what sparked Bill 96 was a book by a professor called Charles Castonguay, an expat Montrealer teaching in Ottawa, who showed that demographically the number of Montrealers speaking French at home dropped 0.5% in 20 years. Like, this was, never mind his math being fudgy, but this little blip was, even if it was true, which it's not, and has been contradicted by Canadian census data, but even if it was true, this little blimp certainly didn't warrant what we've lived through the past couple of years with Bill 96 and the exaggerated effect on everything from education to law to civil rights. So, Joe, you've been one of the leaders in the court of public opinion, in the courts of law. You've decided to run again. You're not carrying an easy burden these days. Being chairman of the English Montreal School Board is not what it used to be. It's not a walk in the park, and you've got a lot of battles still to fight. Tell us about some of them that are upcoming, including the court challenges.
Well, yeah, it's not what it used to be. I worked hard from the moment that we all worked hard on the council, from the moment that we took office to restore the reputation of the EMSB. It was obviously coming from a trusteeship, not coming from a good place. It was very messy, and the EMSB was, on the political side, was seen as a joke. Well, we wanted to restore our reputation as the leaders that we are, and the leaders for the English-speaking community. So we've got a lot of court challenges coming our way. Bill 40 is going to be heard by the Court of Appeal because even though we won, the government decided to appeal that.
That's the one, just to remind our listeners, that's the one on governance. On actual governance of the board.
Yeah, Bill 40 was the one that where they tried to abolish school boards.
Right.
So that's going to be heard by the Court of Appeal. We expect sometime in the fall of 2024, perhaps early 2025. Bill 21, the religious symbols ban, we've obviously sought leave to appeal there, so we're going to wait and see if the Supreme Court is going to allow for the appeal to be heard. We don't have a date for that yet. And, of course, we were able to obtain a stay on Bill 96, which means some of the provisions that infringe upon our constitutional rights are suspended, which means that for the way that we were operating as school boards, it's status quo. Where we were communicating in English, we get to continue to do so. When we were communicating in both languages, we get to continue to do so. It's not exclusively in French. So that's in effect until we get a decision on the actual constitutionality of the bill, which we also expect to be heard sometime early in 2025.
Excellent. Joe Ortonia, Chairman of the English Montreal School Board. He's running for your election. And Joe, we wish you well. Thank you for being
so
with
much.
us. Take care. As I said in the intro, bike paths are never very far from anybody's mind in Montreal. They seem to be aggravating everybody, including quite a few people I've run across who are originally for them. But this big story always seems to be Terrebonne. And to explain the background of what makes people on Terrebonne Avenue and NDG so upset, we have our own Joel Chash, who's been following this from the beginning. And Joel, they're getting quite heated up again.
You better believe it. Hi, Beryl.
Amen.
Listen, so it's going ahead. The bike path's going ahead on Terrebonne in NDG. There was a big fight about it, and there's been a campaign to stop it or get it changed. Doesn't look like that's happening right now, because the city has announced and the borough have announced that the first part of the plan to turn Terrebonne into two one-way streets heading west and east from Cavendish is going ahead, and the first phase will begin about a month from today. So yeah, it's a bike path that's running from Girouard to Coronation, from Girouard in the east to Coronation in the west. It'll be one way in each direction from Cavendish. One side of the road, all the parking will be removed. That's about 300 spots when you count in enforcement of existing regulations preventing parking near intersections, plus 200 actual parking spaces are being removed. And a two-way, round-the-clock, year-long bike path is being installed. So, yes, you're correct. There are a lot of people who are unhappy. There are some who are quite happy. But the opponents say the fight's not over, and they've been rallying to stop it any way they can.
Now, one of the opponents, Yvonne Keeley, used very strong language at the last meeting, saying she felt betrayed. And this is an interesting part of this fight. It seems that the opponents haven't just been saying, okay, anecdotally, we don't want it, we don't like it, but they actually came up with an alternative plan that would have seemed to satisfy everybody, and I don't think the city paid any attention to it.
It's interesting what you're saying, because Yvonne Keeley and another woman quoted in my story, they were members of a committee struck by the borough to find a plan. And they're the ones that saying they felt betrayed because the borough didn't go with their plan. They went with something completely different, right. And the committee's work was left where it was, in the dustbin. And now it's all new. They had a plan that would have allowed more access for parking. The borough has responded to their credit. They've responded to some concerns about safety around the school. There's several schools on that stretch of road, and they said they're going to be narrowing the bike path. They're going to be widening buffer zones where needed, and that they did tweak a little bit of the end on the west end. But to your point, it's interesting that on this issue, every criticism and comment starts with, I'm in favor of bike paths. And most of the time it's sincere. So there are cyclists who are showing up at these anti-bike path meetings because they say there's plenty of paths. Now, I personally ride on Terrebonne more often than I have in the past, just so I could see for myself. I don't see the issue, but then again, I'm not driving with little kids on bikes, and so I don't know what the impact is for families. But there definitely is the fight is still going on. The opponents are saying that they are determined to get this stopped, even though the actual calendar for the work has been released. So what that means, some people are predicting complaints to the city ombudsman again, which is what happened the first time around 4 years ago. But they haven't let on exactly what they mean.
Joel, just to give we got one minute left, just to give a taste of what's coming up this week. You've covered what happened at City Council, where the opposition tried to get another transportation issue, the Cavendish to Cavendish link, done, and they got baffed out again. Just briefly, what happened there? Let people go read the story, which is quite a complete report.
It was an interesting turn of events when Alan D'Souza stood up to present the motion, asking that Cavendish, the connection between the portion of Cavendish and Côte Saint-Luc that ends in Côte Saint-Luc and picks up again in Saint Laurent, that they be connected at some point, as we've been hearing about for 4 decades. He wanted that put back on the front burner because there's no mention of it in the big Hippodrome plan.
Right.
And the response was quite it was quite harsh. The opposition was critiqued as being out of touch. The mayor of Côte-des-Neiges, Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, Gracia Kosafi-Katawa, took her colleague Sonny Morose from Snowdon to task for supporting such a motion, suggesting he wasn't prioritizing his district, and some people saw that as questioning his loyalties.
I'm sorry to come in and editorialize, but only Projet Montreal can think that it's not a city councilor's responsibility to speak to the aggravation of his residents, his constituents' frustrations with traffic backup. What world is this mayor living in?
Listen. This was the tone of the debate at that point. The motion was ultimately defeated. Morose had his say. But what was interesting is, Robert Baudry from the city's executive committee did say that, Cavendish is going to come. It's more complicated than we thought. There's more reflection and study needed, and the neighboring mayors and municipalities and our partners will be updated as to what our plans are in about a month.
Just what Joel Chiashu and Beryl Wiseman love to hear from a politician. More study is necessary.
Absolutely.
Joel, many thanks. And read his material on that council meeting in this week's Suburban.
Quite the turn. Okay,
Take care,
have a
Joel.
great evening. Bye.
Well, sometimes, not always, sometimes the West Island is a bit quieter than the West End. And at least this week, there was an event of real unity and celebrating an organization that does a lot of good to move business ahead in the West Island, and that's PME Montreal, where 6 mayors got together, among many other people, MNAs and MPs, to celebrate this anniversary, and our Chelsea St. Pierre was there. Chelsea, good afternoon. How are you? Good evening, actually.
Yeah. Hi, Beryl.
So tell us a little bit about the PME Montreal and its work, and what a great evening this was with all these mayors and MPs and MNAs. So PME Montreal does what?
Well, PME Montreal is, economic development of the West Island. So PME Montreal will help cities, entrepreneurs navigate all the
bureaucracy,
applications
right?
And the applications through banks, and also for federal grants or federal loans, provincial as well. So just taking all factors and all facets of economic development that normally, let's say, a small business would have an accountant, that would take care of, but they take care of the whole picture and consideration of literally the whole picture of what surrounds a small business and their economic life in order for them to grow. And also looking at the bigger picture within the municipalities or the cities that they're serving. And for example, a good example of that is during COVID. There was many different financing options, grants or loans or help with rent coming in from the government. But rather than the cities or the municipalities managing that, PME was able to manage that on behalf for business owners to help ease them through the pandemic.
Now, with so many mayors coming in, particularly, I know the MNA was there. There were MPs and MP there, but so this has a real positive impact on the municipalities in the West Island. They feel it at the political level.
yeah, I mean, the mayors were really celebrating that day, and that's why we highlighted their celebration of it, because they speaking to many different people at the event, the mayors did show individually and collectively, demonstrated and spoke about their huge appreciation for PME MTL helping to build business, situate businesses, dealing also within the city, but also from the economic perspective. And they really have a well-rounded view of how to adjust businesses and how to grow businesses within the context that they're in. And they really take the time to analyze, and they have multiple specialists that take care of every aspect of that business's development.
Now, we had there was another, we have but a minute left, but I just wanted to get this in because there was another very important West Island organization, the Service Communautaire de Santé Mentale, that had a very special event in Kirkland to raise awareness of mental health. Just give us a brief overview of that, and for listeners, pick up the paper, and she's got a full report in it.
Sure. This is, PCSM perspective, community perspective on mental health is a growing organization that really takes the time to touch base with all the smaller community organizations that either deal with seniors, sometimes youth, sometimes people with
challenges, yeah.
Particular needs within the community. But like Emmanuel always says, Emmanuel Morin, who is the director of operations at PCSM, as she always says, mental health touches everyone in every aspect of the community. So community organizations, anything from a food bank to a seniors community, are all involved in some shape or form in mental health. So
and they're really good about getting local buy-ins from local personalities. Like this event in Kirkland was actually at the Kirkland Arena, where there was hockey teams from various organizations in the West Island that just gave a whole sense of community being involved in this issue.
I'm absolutely terrible with memorizing the name of athletes, so I'm going to apologize to Mark Whitbetter at this moment.
He's smiling.
But there were three former NHL players.
Three? You forgot all three?
No,
it's okay. You're forgiven. One. It's in the story, listeners. Just pick up the paper.
I do remember one because we actually spoke at length, and you could see it on the video interview. Stéphane Richer, who
Mark is nodding his head and he's quite solicitous and pleased that you.
Steph is very good about being out in the community.
Absolutely. Yeah, and he was very forthcoming in his interview, talking about his personal history. And actually, we're meeting next week to do a little bit of a follow-up on that and go a little more in depth, because as that day was for PCSM, we didn't go into depth on his story particularly, but his story will be in the Suburban in the coming weeks. So that's something also for our readers to look forward to. Quite incredible, and thanks to him, as I've understood, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but thanks to him, the NHL now has programs for players who may be struggling with certain issues related to mental health.
Yes, it's a very important program that come online, and it's much needed because they are coming forward now when they need the help.
Absolutely.
Chelsea, thanks very much. Chelsea St. Pierre, pick up the paper and see her great stories. And this is Beryl Wiseman out of the Suburban, and this is Suburban Radio Hour, and we'll be right back. My friend and colleague Anthony Bonaparte. But first, we'll go to the CJD traffic desk.